Okay, good afternoon, Nupur.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Great. It's good to
Okay,
be.
so we're all homebound and we're just trying to have some fun online, right? And in the process, do some little talk about topics of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Nupur, you are an Ayurveda trained practitioner. So we want to talk a little bit about Ayurveda, and in particular because we are in COVID times and people obviously are. It's not normal times, right? People are aroused, people are having, all these troubles staying indoors. And when they come out, whether to wear the mask, not to wear the mask, all that stuff. So part of it would be, what would Ayurveda say about it? Uh, but let's just start from the beginning. Ayurveda is not something that everybody knows about or everybody sort of cares about. So, but those who know, they love it. So let me ask you, first question, what is Ayurveda and why does it interest you?
So, Ayurveda comes out of a tradition that is very much tied to union of form and sound. So, explaining what the word means is the best way to actually explain what it is, because the name itself is intimately tied to what it is. So, Ayur is life, the span of life, not necessarily the life force, but the lived life. Right? And Veda is the science. Veda means science. So put together, Ayurveda is the science of life, meaning the science of how to live life, not just physically staying alive, but how to live life in a way that maximizes productivity, happiness, the potential for growth, and all of these things. So what that means in terms of what Ayurveda is practically is that Ayurveda covers medicine, it covers psychology, it covers anything that affects our ability to progress in life, whether that be, in ancient times, possession was considered a part of Ayurveda if someone was having spiritual possession. Um, the stars were incorporated into Ayurveda. You could have a problem with the way that the planets were interacting with you, and that was causing some problems in your life. And so that would be something you would go to a Vaidya for, to an Ayurvedic doctor. And then, of course, physical health issues, mental health issues. So Ayurveda covers the full scope of health, from spiritual health to mental health to physical health. And although the scope has changed with the advent of modern medicine, Ayurveda, as it is practiced in the modern world, covers roughly the same scope. Of course, surgery we leave to the modern surgeons. But other than that, all areas of health, whether it be the heart or any other organ or any pathology, can be addressed with Ayurvedic medicine.
Very good. So the second part of my question was, kind of you began to answer this. Why does Ayurveda interest you more than regular medicine or speech communication, which is, was another of your interest areas? Why did you go into
Right.
Ayurveda?
Because Ayurveda is a science of life as a wholeness rather than discrete elements, right? It's not the science of healing the kidney or of any particular part or just the chemistry or just this. It covers the holistic aspects of life. And so because of that, you are able to address anything that is affecting health, regardless of what level it occurs from, whether it is from the biochemical level or it is from the psychological level or whatever. And to me, I find that so appealing because it is so effective at addressing the core issues. We think of health as having your biochemistry within the right limits, like, oh, my blood sugar is within the right limit. Starts to go out of the limits. We don't really tend to, as a rule, as a society, I mean, we don't tend to go outside of thinking of oh, did I eat this recently, or have I been eating a lot of sugar, when we're considering why things are going wrong. But when you take the Ayurvedic perspective, the holistic perspective, you can incorporate stress, family history. Are there other extenuating factors that are contributing to the situation? And by doing so, you can identify the cause and not just the symptom, what is happening right now, and actually remove that root issue entirely and leave that person, A, having agency over their own life, and B, actually feeling better in a way that does not leave them chronically hooked onto um, some kind of medicine that they have to keep taking and they keep getting worse, which is a problem that the modern medical paradigm commonly runs into, that people, once they get sick, just continue to get worse, and at best they can just slow down the process. So this is what draws me to Ayurveda, is that it actually is a science of solutions, not just not, of course, life-saving, but more than just life-saving. When you have a problem, getting to the root issue, eliminating that entirely, and giving that person their life back. And that is just so fulfilling. And I did consider going for other traditions or other paradigms in the past, but it was just so fulfilling that I couldn't make any other choice.
That's great. It's good to be doing one's dharma. First of all, discovering what one's dharma is and then doing it. So let's get to the very local issue right now, timely issue we began. This is COVID time. So people are having this arousal and anxiety and then challenge with staying indoors. And then there's always the physical aspect that somebody might catch. Some of my friends have caught and some have actually lost their loved ones. What would Ayurveda recommend in the current times to do to best cope with this really horrible global pandemic?
Well, I will cite my guru, Dr. Vasant. Just as this pandemic started, he released a video on his YouTube channel that was so beautiful, where he talked about how in the scriptures they say that in times of great upheaval, when there is great immorality happening outside, which we are seeing in across the world, really, on the political level, people are being left to go hungry or suffer when the resources are available to help them, which is, really the core issue. And what he expressed was that it's from the scripture, in such times where such suffering is being allowed to happen despite having the resources available, pandemics are likely to occur. This is straight from the scriptures, that when people are allowed to suffer despite having the resources, pandemics will occur. And so his insight was, first, do what you can to serve humanity. When we calm ourselves and we serve others in whatever form we can, that is how we bring an end to what is giving rise to this pandemic. Second, he said, stay home, and to which I agree, which modern medicine also agrees with. The less that people are meeting, the less that there is interaction, the less the virus is likely to spread. So this is possibly the best way that we can serve others, serve humanity, is to stay home as far as and stay isolated. And then following that, wearing a mask, or wearing a face shield, wearing gloves, all of these ways that we can prevent contact with other people, especially with people who we don't know for a fact don't have the virus. This is the best way to prevent spread. And with diseases like this, preventing spread is actually so much more vital than trying to find a way to cure it, which is unfortunately something a lot of people are focusing on is, well, if I get it, how do I cure it? Don't worry about that so much. Prevent it from happening in the first place, and then you won't have that problem. Now, of course, for people who don't have the choice, they have to work, they have to go outside, they unfortunately are in a financial situation or whatever, where they really cannot afford to stay home, or their home environment is similarly unsafe because of the other people that are there. For those people, again, masks, face shields, all of these kinds of preventative measures, being mindful of staying 6 feet away or 2 meters away from other people, and staying calm and breathing normally. Breathing normally means breathing from the belly. This means in through the nose. The breath descends into the belly. There's a point just behind the belly button where you should feel that the breath has reached. And then you can hold that breath for a second or 2 seconds. And then you exhale again through the nose. And you are just calm with this, you're regular with this. There is no pushing. If you can breathe for 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out, that's fine. If you can breathe 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, that's fine. It doesn't matter. The regularity is actually what matters, and the breathing through the nose. Often, what happens is that in situations like this, people get anxious because they are worried, of course, because they don't want to get sick, they get sick. And then, without realizing, they drop into sympathetic breathing. There are two types of breathing: parasympathetic, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, what is often called the rest and digest system, the restful breathing, the kind of breathing you do in sleep, what I was describing just now, through the nose, slow, relaxed, regular. And then instead of that, they do sympathetic breathing, which is connected to the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, which increases stress levels, causes the release of cortisol. The body is thinking that it is in a fight or flight situation, and so it is getting ready to flee. And so because of that, your immune system is immediately compromised because your body is devoting all its resources to being prepared for a fight, which of course there is no physical thing to fight, it's a virus. So by changing your breathing style, by dropping into parasympathetic breathing, your body is being reminded, oh yes, we will rest, we will digest our food, and we will keep our immune system strong. There is no need to run, there is no need to flee or fight anything. And from there, your immune system is already stronger. So these are the most important things you can do. Distance yourself, stay home as far as possible, wear a mask, and breathe.
So thank you. Is that like pranayama, essentially a variety of deep breathing, the Anulom
Well, I
Vilom
mean,
kind of
of
thing, or
course,
something different?
pranayama also is included in this, but I meant just in general. People discount how incredibly influential just everyday breathing is. You see, we eat, at least once a day for most people. We go to the bathroom, let's say at least, 3, 4 times a day, all things considered. We brush our teeth twice a day. We shower once a day. We breathe on average every 8 seconds, give or take. That is the average breathing rate. Every 8 seconds. We are doing this all day, every day, when we're showering, when we're eating, when we're walking, when we're working, when we're sleeping. If we can control this one activity and change its modus from anxious, stressed to restful, peaceful, full of immune support, that already changes so much about how your body is functioning. Then, of course, if you are doing meditation on top of that, if you are taking any kind of supplements that, like vitamin C, or eating healthy, or doing, like you said, pranayam, breathing exercises to support health, all of these things, these are just icing. But just normal, regularized breathing is in itself so powerful that all of those are not necessary, but they are just extra.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned meditation. I was about to mention that because we are here in Vedic City, right? We meditate a lot. And I do believe that meditation sort of helps you calm down everything in addition to pranayama and etc. And, it builds an
Meditation,
immune system.
physically, meditation is connected to the same kind of behavior as parasympathetic breathing. It helps to support the immune system. It helps the body to direct resources exactly where they are needed in the most efficient way possible. Because in a stress system, your body is directing your resources to whatever it thinks will allow it to escape or to fight, right? That is not in most situations necessary. Unless you are literally about to fight a bear or you're outrunning, those resources are being misallocated. But if you then redirect them to where they are exactly needed, your kidney is working hard right now, direct those resources, that energy to the kidney. Your brain is working hard right now, redirect that energy there, and so on and so forth. If that is how you are functioning, then of course you are going to respond to any kind of disease process much more efficiently, and your immune response will be much more efficient as well. Which is why, yes, meditation is so powerful. It just helps your body return to the most normalized, regularized functioning. and it is doing the same thing as regular breathing. Pranayama is also doing the same thing. Yoga asanas, when performed properly with the proper attention, not just physically doing the motions, but with presence of mind, do the same thing. And this is the core of the Ayurvedic understanding of immunity, is that immunity is not something you, immunity is something you do. Because it is, when you think about it, active immunity is your body actively responding to something that has entered it. And to support that kind of active action, you have to take action. And so that is the principle that is guiding this advice that I'm presenting right now.
Yeah, well, thank you. So these are kind of all the limbs of Yoga Sutra we've been talking about, right? The right, Achar, Vichar, the prana, all the limbs of yoga. Now, Ayurveda also has sort of differentiation by person, right? Now, I mean, Ayurveda has a sort of a classifying personalities by the doshas. So, I mean, all the things you talked about so far works for everybody, I believe, right? But how does, doshas come in, or does it relate mostly to food or in terms of particular practices? What are the doshas? If you could briefly explain the notion of doshas and then begin to say sort of how doshas might help recommend different regimens or practices for different people, whether it's food or herbs or etc.
Now, I will say, as a general caveat, I can't give any kind of specific advice because,
Right.
as you said, you are correct that Ayurveda, because it takes a holistic perspective, requires that each individual be taken as their holistic situation, their body, their health, their lifestyle, their diet, their environment, the people around them, even their home, etc. Right? So I can't give any kind of advice that, like you said, everything I said was general. I can't give anything that could be specific to you or to anything and say that applies to everyone, because the basic Ayurvedic principle is that anything can be medicine, anything can be poison. When it is given, right? So Ayurveda is based on principles of the elements, right? There are 5 elements. There is air or ether, air, fire, water, and earth. These are the 5 elements. There has been some success in correlating them, in fact, with the 5 kinds of superfields in quantum physics. So there may be a modern scientific objectivist understanding that can correlate with the way that Ayurveda understands the world. But that remains to be further looked into. Just to bring up the idea that these are not just archaic terms for, a pre-scientific understanding of the world. This is a very profound understanding of how the world is laid out. That there are these 5 elements. They have specific energies and specific actions. And together, these 5 combine into 3 things. Vata is ether and air. As Dr. Loud says, it is the principle of movement and communication. It is the only reason we feel pain. Without Vata, we would feel no pain. It is the reason we are able to move. It is the reason we are able to speak. It is the reason that we are able to be spiritual. It is the reason we are able to be creative. It is the expansion of space, ether, and it is the movement of air. So this is Vata. And Vata is associated with the color black. It is associated with thinness, emaciation. It is associated with speech. So, you meet someone who talks a lot, there's some Vata vitiation going on there. You meet someone who is really, like, all of their limbs are kind of crooked, straight about them. Their nose is a little this way, their mouth is a little this way, their limbs are a little, that's Vata. Then you have the second dosha. As I said, Vata is the one with legs. Vata is the one that moves. So that one's very mobile, very easy, it's light. Then you have the second, kind of heavier, composed of fire and water, that is Pitta. It is the element of digestion, transformation, heat. This is what maintains our metabolism. This is also what maintains our intellect. This is what allows us to take in some words that we read in a book and transform it into knowledge. Pitta is what gives rise to great thinkers. If you'll ever see, oftentimes these great rishis, these great sages, and great scientists, and then they have no hair, right? They've gone bald, and even including Dr. Lad. And his joke is that they had so much intense pitta, so much intellect, that they burned away their hair out of their head because there was so much heat there. And this is the power of pitta. Pitta people are brilliant speakers. They have bright eyes, lustrous skin, often sometimes oily, sharpness. There's a sharpness to the way they speak, to the way they think, to the way they, look. There's a pointiness to them. And you'll see they're like great with discipline, military types. They are often pitta. And there is a movement to it, but it is slower than Vata because Vata is, just like the wind. It can move in any direction. Pitta is very regular, like a frog hopping. There's a specific rhythm with which it hops, and it doesn't deviate. Hop, 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 hop. So this is Pitta. The third principle is Kapha. Kapha is composed of water and earth, and as you can imagine, it is the dullest, the heaviest element of the three. It is the element of cohesion. It is the element of stability. It is what makes up our bones, our muscles, the physicality of our body, what allows us to be one contiguous being rather than disparate parts. It is Kapha that allows us to love because it creates the cohesion between one and another. It is what allows us to be stable and calm because it is not moved by, provocation or irritation or, even excitement. It allows us to be where we are. So Kapha people maybe don't make the best public speakers, a little monotonous, but if there's any work that requires them to be still and stable or physically strong, to be physically centered, they are excellent at it. They make excellent martial artists. They make excellent physical laborers. They are tall and well built, and there's something of a royal look to them because they have big features, big eyes, big mouth, big hands, big body, and they are imposing in a way that feels comforting because, like I said, there's a cohesive, friendly aspect to them. So these are the three doshas, and together they make up the five elements, or the five elements make up these three doshas. And these are the three elements that make up the entirety of the human body. As I mentioned, there's the movement aspect, so you can include that as the movement of neural impulses or the movement of blood through the blood vessels. There's the element of digestion, which shows up in the stomach. There's the transformative element that is happening throughout the body where, glucose is being transformed into ATP, mitochondria. There's the element of transformation of, like I said, ideas within the brain or within the mind. Then there's the physical substance of the body, and there's kapha, etc. There's so many applications, and of course they work together in various ways. But these are the elements that Ayurveda uses to understand what is happening within the body. Now, the beauty of this structure of understanding is that by not simplifying, but absorbing all of the complexity of the human body or of biochemistry or all of these elements that make up this physical being into these three things, we are able to incorporate treatment for whatever is going on without having to worry so much about the nitty gritty of, like I said, your specific blood glucose levels, using the example I used earlier. We don't have to worry so much about the specifics of those numbers. Although, of course, no Ayurvedic physician would say, don't check your blood glucose levels. You don't want to know the number. Of course not. We'll use any tools that are available to us. And that is just another tool to know the numbers. But the point is that we are able to treat that without having to worry so much about the specifics of that number, because by checking the pulse and reading the doshic balance that is included in the pulse there, by looking at the features, by looking at other factors like the state of the skin, looking in the eyes, looking on the tongue for various uh, symptomatic factors there, looking at various diagnostic points on the body, many of which are in common with what a modern medical doctor or allopathic doctor would look at. We are able to see what is happening in the body. And then, this is the key differentiation, is that we ask the person who we're helping what they are doing with their diet, with their lifestyle, with their habits, with the people around them, their environment, and so on, all those things I mentioned earlier. And through the combination of physical symptoms, which we can use diagnostic tools to understand, and their own reporting on their symptoms and their own reporting on their behavior, we are able to see the full picture of what is happening and why it's happening, put that together, and then treat that. And the Ayurvedic understanding of treatment is, well, simple. Whatever is happening, if there is too much of something, treat it with the opposite. If there's too little of something, give that thing. So, for example, someone who has been exposed to heavy wind, right? Wind, as you could probably deduce, is connected to air, because it's moving air, and that would be connected to Vata. So if someone has been outside in a wind gale and they have just been thrown around in the wind and it's been cold and just so drying because they're just being thrown back and forth and they're so disoriented, and they come in to my office right after that, they have no other problems, just that they've been exposed to this wind and they are so disoriented, I would sit them down, stability. I would wrap them in a blanket, warm to counteract the cold. I would give them something warm and wet to drink. You know, a drink is always wet. That's liquid and warm to counteract the dry and the cold outside. And I would speak to them softly and calmly because they've just been exposed to a great deal of noise, a great deal of, frenetic energy. So through this, I am able to treat their situation and allow them to feel calm and proceed with their life as if everything is normal. This is a very simple example. Most people would think to do that. Someone is, thrown around. They would think, oh, let me calm them down. And this is the beauty of Ayurveda, is that we are not doing anything that is, just fantastically out of the realm of understanding. This is a very simple principle that we as human beings instinctively apply to all situations. It's just that sometimes we don't know the best tools to use in any given situation, and this is what Ayurvedic training allows us to access, is the right tools. But this principle is the same as always. If you have anything too much of something, introducing the opposite. And if you have not enough of something, introduce that so that you have enough. And so this
that is the idea of balance, right? We were talking about balance, and I was giving you an example of how even Yoga Sutra talks about sort of, if you think too much of one thing, you obsess. Patanjali says, think of the opposite. You don't want to get carried away in any one side, too happy, too sad, too this or too that, and that sort of creates imbalance. And in this case of Ayurveda, you're talking those three instead of one, right? More Vata, more Pitta, more Kapha. So you just want to balance them.
And it gets a little, we'll get a little in the weeds if we go into this, but the reason I'm able to talk about these opposites, these dualisms, the hot, cold, etc., is that each dosha is associated with certain qualities. Vata is light, cold, dry, mobile. Pitta is hot, oily, sharp, regular. There's these different qualities, and there's in total 20 qualities, which is 10 sets of opposites that are considered particularly useful diagnostically in Ayurveda. Although, of course, there are infinite adjectives, so you could use all of them. But these are the 20 that we use in Ayurveda, and certain ones are associated with different doshas. So it's not an exact, there's no you're either this or either this, because there's three.
Right. Yeah.
So you can, at any given time, you could be any different thing. So for example, if you're experiencing a lot of cold, Kapha is also cold and Vata is also cold. And this is where the physician's mind comes in of, is this Vata cold or Kapha cold? You have to actually be able to differentiate by seeing what are the causative factors. Has this person been drinking a lot of cold drinks? Okay, that's probably more of a Kapha thing. Have they been exposed to a lot of cold wind? That's probably more of a Vata thing. So, these are the kinds of things that Ayurvedically we have to actually look at to be able to identify specifically what is going on with any specific person. But, that the layperson
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily need to know that.
So very good explanation. Thank you very much. That's very cogent. I appreciate that. Now let me ask you this thing. Since you gave the example of being out in the wind and the vata goes up, and we talk of like how do you take a vata churn, and so many ways to pacify vata pacifying things. This kind of lockdown, being locked at home, especially let's say where people have apartments and or smaller abode, they're not able to go out. They're locked in the apartment for months and end. Is that sort of a particular element towards raising more of the pitta or the kapha, or probably not vata because they're not moving too much? Do you think?
Actually, this is we are again getting to one of those situations where I can't give any kind of
But in
general
broad, since you
opinion.
talk of vata going up because of that, does the
Well,
lockdown?
actually, no. This is actually this is what makes this tough. Is that if a person is stuck at home by themselves, if it's just one person stuck at home and they have no one else, that actually might be very vata provoking. Even though they are in a contained space, that may be very vata provoking because the loneliness is very vata. Vata floats around, but there's no cohesion, right? It's very separate, it's isolated. So that may increase vata for them. But if someone is stuck at home in a space where maybe they still have people around, so there's not that kind of isolation factor, but they're stuck in the same routine of doing the same thing every day, and they're starting to feel like they're losing their mind because they're just stuck repeating so much routine. This may be causing kapha to rise, or kapha depression, because kapha is stability. So too much stability, too much immobility, too much being stuck in one place doing the same thing over and over and over again will cause kapha to go up. Or if you're stuck at home with someone who yells a lot, or in an environment that is very hot or sharp in some way, there's a lot of sharp noises coming in. Someone who lives in the city, there's a lot of like sharp noises coming in all the time. That may be very pitta provoking. They're just like angry and they don't know why, or they have pitta type depression, which often comes with a lot of anger and like irritation or self-criticism. Depression, for the record, can come in all three types. Never think that you are wrong if you have depression and think of yourself as a specific doshic type. You're not just messed up. Everyone can have depression. For some reason, everyone associates it with kapha. I guess because we think of depression as the lying in bed and crying type, but that is only one type of depression. You can also be the anxious type, like vata, or the irritated, angry type, like pitta, who frankly are more likely to harm themselves. So we should direct attention to that. I think that is something that we should all know, is that all forms of depression deserve attention and love and support, and you are not wrong for having them. But I digress. So any specific situation can cause any specific dosha to rise. So I can't say specifically
Okay, I
what is
got it. I
causing.
just wanted to throw out that because people listening to this might think, oh,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
there a
And
particular
I
thing that's
wish
going up?
I wish there was something I could say
Yeah.
that like this is the. But the truth is, there's really only one thing I can say, and it's the same thing I said earlier. Breathe.
Yeah.
Do your pranayam, do your meditation, do your yoga practice or your namas or whatever if you have spiritual practices, or do your your rosaries or whatever, whatever spiritual practices you have that allow you to access something larger than yourself, regardless of what is being raised. Well, there is Vata by isolation, Pitta by a very stressful environment, Kapha by immobility or stuckness. Spirituality will always help you access something outside of that space because it will allow you to access that which is infinite, that which is always available to you. And it will allow you to handle this a lot better than you otherwise would. I can give personal examples of, for myself, allowed me to stay sane in a situation that might otherwise have driven me insane. And I also have friends who, during quarantine, learned new spiritual techniques, new breathing techniques, etc., and found that it immediately brought marked improvement in their ability to be alone with themselves. So that would be the one thing I think I could say that is general to everyone stuck in at home and lockdown. Please um, find, if you don't have a spiritual practice, find one. If you do, please be devoted to it. This is the best thing you can do with yourself right now.
Thank you. I have to ask one final question. This was great. I'll come down one level to more practical thing. My dear friend, Indian friend in UK, she asked me just a few days ago that she's getting into cooking. She's enjoying cooking for her neighbors down the street because they love Indian food. And because I think everybody's kind of locked up, so you just sort of locked down. So you just basically moved very local movements and people liking that food. She's feeling encouraged to do some Ayurvedic cooking. So I told her maybe she should read some Dr. Lad's books, etc. But what would you give a general recommendation in terms of what would work well with Ayurveda in general, lockdown or no lockdown? Like, are there any particular herbs that you recommend, like jeera, what you call cumin seed, or is there something that one should do more of in this environment? Or in general with Ayurveda, what are some one or two or three things that you would suggest to cook in that way?
There are some general guidelines with Ayurvedic cooking that can definitely apply here. There are certain combinations of food that unfortunately in the Western world are very common and are prescribed in Ayurvedic understanding because they are combinations of foods that are incompatible. And so, like drinking milk and then drinking orange juice right after, it would curdle in your stomach, it gives you stomach ache. This is something that people instinctively understand. There are others that people don't, unfortunately, realize are making them sick or making them feel bad, that in fact are. So one very common example is fruit and yogurt, or any kind of dairy and yogurt for the most part, but especially fruit and yogurt because a lot of people like fruit yogurt or their granola yogurt mix or whatever. Please avoid that. No yogurt and fruit, no cheese and fruit, no cottage cheese and fruit, whatever it is. Stop. It is not good for you. I cannot say the number of people, my clients, other people's clients, friends who used to eat combinations like that, who stopped and had their acne clear up, or the eczema start to go away, or they were sleeping better at night, or they weren't irritated all the time, or they weren't having diarrhea. The list goes on. It is so bad. Please stop. That's rule number one. Number two, don't eat leftover food if you can avoid it. If you can, it's one thing if it's like something you made this morning and you're eating it this evening and it hasn't been like put in the fridge or whatever. That's fine. Like you can eat that. That's totally fine. But if you're doing that meal prep thing where you're like making, a meal a week in advance, and then you have like 7 of the same meal in your fridge, and then you pull one out and it's 6 days old and you're eating it. That is old food, but that's not even really the point. Ayurvedically, the life that was in that food from whatever living thing, whether it's a plant or an animal, like no judgment, whether you're vegetarian or non-vegetarian, whatever life gave itself to be that food is leaving once it's cooked, or once it's been, separated from whatever, the sun or whatever, eating grass, whatever it was giving it its life for. And slowly, it's already losing its life by the time it gets to you from the grocery store. When you cook it and put it in the fridge for a week, by the time it actually gets in your stomach, there's like no life force left in that food. And you will find that that stuff makes you feel heavier. It takes longer to digest. You may feel gassy afterwards. So there's just a lot of that. So especially right now when you are at home, I know for some people that in this situation they're ironically busier because their work requires them to be on calls all the time or whatever. But wherever possible, please, please cook fresh food. The best possible things are warm, at least slightly oily with a small amount of oil. Oil is not evil, you guys. Your body needs oil to function. Warm with a little bit of liquid somewhere in the meal. You don't want to be eating totally dry things. With a little bit of oil and freshly cooked, and preferably not frozen, unless that is the only thing you can access, like frozen vegetables or something. As far as possible, not frozen. That is the best possible thing you can cook. So that is the best place you can start. As for spices or herbs, it is very individual. I would also co-sign the recommendation of Dr. Led's recipe book, his cookbook. It is not only a good recipe book as a cookbook, but it also outlines some of the important principles. So I would recommend that book, which I have linked. So you can send out that link or something. It's a very good one. I've used the recipes from there before. It's very good. And follow your instincts. This is something people forget to do. When they eat in front of the TV or listening to music or distracted in some way. And so then they don't pay attention to what they're eating. They're not really sitting with their food. And so they don't observe what food makes them feel good or when food makes them feel bad. And so I would say the most important thing you can do with regards to making good Ayurvedic food is the next time you cook, pay attention before you start, while you make it, and then while you eat it, and then after you eat it. Be present with your body. Does it feel good? Yes, no. And let that guide you the next time you cook. That's it.
Okay, so those are good principles, and thank you, Nupur, for sharing all those. And I will stop here, and thank you very much.